When do we become who we are meant to be? Or, more specifically, when did I become who I am? Of course, the answer to that question is not one moment that I can point to, but rather many moments, some small and some big, packed into my most formative years. When I think about becoming who I am so grateful for the role my parents played, of course, and my grandparents and siblings and others. But I simply cannot imagine becoming who I am if I had not spent a significant portion of those formative years at my best friend's house in the quiet cul-de-sac of Miami Road in Niles, Michigan, being fed and loved by his mother, and being guided and celebrated by Dr. Doyle W. Rausch, who I will now refer to as Homer for the rest of these remarks. The name for him our group of friends have had since the early 1980s. I don't know why, standing here today, I can't remember why, we thought calling the most brilliant man in our lives a name that sounded like it belonged to a farmer, with no offense intended to any actual Homers who might be in attendance today. And this was years before the cartoon Homer Simpson became famous, mind you. But from early in my friendship with Doyle, his father became Homer, and so there it is. That's the name I'll use. Doyle and I became best friends in seventh grade, and at the time, his brother, Marvin, more than 20 years older, was an adult with his own family and a career living far away from Niles, Michigan, down here in Columbus. So effectively, I became Doyle's brother. We were that close. And so every day, starting in middle school, Doyle and Homer would pick me up for a ride to school in the red, maybe scarlet, wood paneled station wagon. And every day, that car ride was my first and probably best classroom of the day. Homer spent the 15 minutes of that car ride every day sharing his encouragement and enthusiasm for us that we do something that day that mattered. Every day, a couple of squirrely or sleepy middle school kids immersed in Greek philosophy or the merits of mathematics or musical education or the challenge of getting the rap, a euphemism for encountering and dealing with the young ladies of our adolescence. There was no topic in which Homer was not learned, or at least overly enthusiastic to talk about. And every day, the overriding theme of that conversation is printed on the funeral cards for you all to see. Every day, he told us to do something excellent, to seize the day, which once came out as squeeze the day. And once he realized his mistaken diction, he went with it, holding up his fist as if he were crushing a lemon, and he delivered a sermon with the fire of a Baptist preacher. Squeeze it! Squeeze the day! Get every bit of juice out of it! Don't leave a drop left in this day because you squeezed it so hard. Jesus, squeeze this goddamn day! By the time we got to Ringlardner Junior High School, we were all laughing. And you know what? To this day, when I see the words carpe diem, I translate them to squeeze the day. Some of the best advice I ever got. The most important conversations with Homer took place on his back porch, where he would relax each day when the weather permitted, or from his lazy boy during the winter months. A visit to my best friend's house always included time with Homer in his chair. One conversation that still stands out to me, that since having with Homer as a teenager I have stolen and made my own, and even passed along to my own children, was the time he asked me what I thought was mankind's greatest invention. I don't remember my answer, airplanes or rockets or something, but he was really asking me that question, like Socrates used to do, because he had an answer he wanted to share. Homer told me that mankind's greatest invention was the university, because at some point in human history, mankind decided to create places of higher learning, to bring scholarship and research and literacy together for the sole purpose of learning and advancing the knowledge that we collectively share about life, the universe, and everything. I remember that Homer never suggested that he was referring to one specific university, but I imagine he had one in mind, maybe Illinois Institute of Technology, I'm not sure. But if he had one specific university in mind, he never told me. I can't imagine which one it would be. But this conversation, for me, was the essence of Homer. Life is about learning and sharing knowledge, and humanity is better when we come together at a place that values learning for learning's sake. He was immensely curious and asked questions about every little detail of our lives, and he celebrated every answer. On our drive down yesterday, as Bill and I talked about Homer, Bill gave a great example of how this went. If you told Homer that you had helped with a paper route that morning, he damn near awarded you the Congressional Medal of Homer, and it went something like this. You helped with a paper route this morning? Jesus, that's fantastic. How many papers did you deliver? 16. 16 papers? Well, Christ, that's a hell of a contribution you made this morning to 16 homes. That's 16 families who are going to read about the world today. That's outstanding. You know, Western civilization can't run without newspapers. You helped keep the world order intact this morning. Jesus, our nation is more secure because you went out this morning and delivered papers. It's outstanding. Christ. And in his rich superlatives of youth enthusiasm, which were always heartfelt, you couldn't do anything but accept the praise. It was impossible to ever be a cynical teenager around Homer. His beautiful spirit made that impossible. There was just too much joy in the simple and mundane. And you know what? It lifted us up. I spent my formative years with my best friend being lifted up into the world of higher education and knowledge and humanity's greatest gifts every single time I was in the company of Homer. And you know what? That's how I became who I am. My mother reminded me just yesterday that it was Homer's influence, not hers or my father's. Beautiful people, but not champions of education like Homer was, who set my mind on education and who also taught me that if I could find a career that I love and work that I care about, I will have a very rewarding life. I love my parents and they supported me every step of the way, but Homer challenged and encouraged me in a way that only he could. One of my favorite memories of Homer, and it wasn't one memory, many, was the way he had contagious laughter with Doyle. The two of them would get to giggling, and then to laughing, and then to the kind of sustained belly laughter that makes it hard to breathe. It happened once when Homer told us the story of chopping a turkey neck at his job in a supermarket butcher shop, and the two of them laughed so hard for so long that all Lois and I could do was look at each other. In her beautiful way, she just shook her head a little and said to me, "Would you look at those two assholes?" And then she and I joined in the laughter. Homer always wanted to laugh and smile with you. Conversations with him were already preloaded with joy and good humor. He set a tone at the outset of every conversation that what was going to be exchanged was going to be a celebration, even of some detail of your life that seemed so insignificant. He held you up in his esteem. This beautiful man, with all his scholarship and brilliance and accomplishments, always made you feel like you were the most important person he'd ever met. Over the years, I had the chance to travel with Doyle and Homer and Lois a few times, to Ohio to visit Marvin and his family, or just with Doyle and Homer. On one occasion, it was Homer and my father, a Michigan State police officer who happened to be hard of hearing. My dad worked a particularly dangerous stretch of I-94, a corridor between Chicago and Detroit that was a pipeline for drugs and weapons. You have to keep in mind, this was the mid-1980s, and gang violence was becoming a problem in the country. As we traveled, Doyle and I in the back seat, Homer and my father in the front, Homer asked my father what he knew about or had experienced with gangs. "I heard they're becoming a real problem," Homer said. "No," my dad said, "they aren't really a problem. But I've heard they can be quite dangerous." "No," my dad said, "not really. But I understand they often have weapons." "Not that I've heard of," my dad said. And it took a minute or two for all of us to realize that my dad thought that Homer had asked him about gays. But the amazing thing about the conversation, and why I share it today, is that in the exchange between Homer and my dad, there was no racism in it, no homophobia, no intolerance or bigotry. It was two men who were progressive ahead of their time, but trying to figure out their misunderstanding. We were raised by good men. 3 years ago, when Lois passed away, Doyle asked if I would share some words about his mother at the funeral, and I was honored to do it. Unfortunately, I was out of town on a business trip at that time and couldn't share those words in person, so I emailed them to Pastor Wooden, and he saw to it that they were read at the funeral. When Doyle Sr. passed away a couple of days ago, and I assured Doyle that I would be here to celebrate his life and say goodbye, Doyle again asked if I would share some words in memory of his father. I told him again that it would be an honor. So I went back and read the words I wrote 3 years ago about Lois, and I realized that so many of the things I held so dearly about her, I also hold dear about Homer. Theirs was a love story. They delighted in each other, a marriage of respect and good humor, and that most powerful unconditional love for each other, for their sons and their sons' friends, and then the people their sons loved and their granddaughters, and so on. As teenagers, Doyle and I used to do stupid things and rope his parents into going along with us. Somewhere in Doyle's basement or attic is a box of video evidence of our shenanigans that should never again see the light of day. But I liked the person I was in Homer's eyes when I was 13, and when I was 23, and 33, and 43. I suspect the things that I have to say about Homer are very familiar to everyone here. I said at the beginning of this piece, Doyle and I became brothers. He had his brother Marvin here in Columbus, of course, but I was the brother in town. And then Dan and Bill became brothers, and Paul Stone and Schmees and the Mollison boys and Pat Fisher, and so on. And then Doyle moved to Columbus to go to OSU and became a Pike, and I heard about Grimace and Buffer, Dirtbag, and the rest. And his network of brothers grew by, I don't know, dozens, maybe hundreds. And then he became a professional, and his network of brothers grew, and sisters, too. But Doyle considered so many people his brother. It's how his parents taught him to treat others. So as I close today, I want to remind Doyle that you have literally hundreds of brothers and sisters who will always help you remember your father. You might have more brothers than anybody I've ever met. And any of us who spent time with you and your father on his back porch, fed by your mother, will help you remember the story of love that is your life. As my mom said to me yesterday, Doyle really won the lottery when it came to parents. And I know what she means. They helped raise me and so many others. And their love and their personalities live in you and in Marvin and in your nieces. And your life is an honor to them for the way you love and the joy and the enthusiasm you share. I grew up with you on that back porch with your dad, Doyle, and not a day goes by with any juice in it that isn't made better for who your mom and dad were for those of us who love them and love you and Jenny and your family still.